Thursday, May 22nd. Yesterday, we told you about our favorite mid-round picks. Now we're looking at picks 100 and later. Who are our favorite late-round picks? Did you know that Darnell Mooney is available after pick 100? He was a number 3 wide receiver on a per-game basis last year, and he did that with only 6 red zone, 2 green zone, and 1 end zone target in all of 2024. Come on, let's get a few more of those for Darnell Mooney. Did you know that Keon Coleman, another guy available late in drafts, averaged 7.4 yards after the catch per reception with a 15.2 yard ADOT. That combination of ADOT and YAC it's like he's in a world of his own there. Now, it was not a lot of catches, but we haven't seen something like that since Marquez Valdez-Scantling, folks. So Keon Coleman, I thought that was pretty interesting. He had a high ADOT and did a lot after the catch, but unfortunately, a small sample probably doesn't mean much. Anyway, welcome to the show, guys. What is your favorite late round pick? Dave, if you had to pick one right now, give me a favorite late round pick.
I've talked about this duo of tight ends quite a bit. The T's, Tucker Kraft, Tyler Warren, both of them are going after 100th overall. I'm not sure if they're going after 100th overall in our drafts, but I remember hearing Matt LaFleur talk about Tucker Kraft as soon as the season ended, saying, we got to get this guy more involved. His efficiency was outstanding. I think with more target volume, he could be a top 10 fantasy tight end, if not a top 5. And with Tyler Warren, it's just, I'm in love with the talent. I think the opportunity will be there in Indianapolis as well. I know the quarterbacks stink. They still can get the ball to this guy who's 6'6", 250, and is going to run a bunch of routes inside of 10 yards. So a lot of catches on deck, and hopefully a big-time red zone threat for the Colts too. Not necessarily at the goal line, but let's say between the 20 and the 5. That's where I would expect to see a lot of Tyler Warren make some big numbers this year.
Okay, so that's a couple of tight ends to keep in mind, Tyler Warren and Tucker Kraft. And in the draft that we did yesterday, Tyler Warren went with the second to last pick of round 12. Tucker Kraft, Dave took him with the second to last pick of round 13. How about that? Jamie, who is your favorite late round pick?
I'll go with Jordan Mason if we're getting him in this range. He may end up being the best running back for the Vikings if Aaron Jones, at his age, misses any time. Last year, he played through 3 separate injuries, and Kevin O'Connell's already talking about reducing his workload from a year ago. So I'm going to let a lot of people draft Aaron Jones, and I'm going to draft a lot of Jordan Mason. So especially where I've seen Jones go and in some cases seen him ranked. Yeah, I'm out on Aaron Jones, and Mason's value to me is incredible.
Do you think he'll be a top one after 100th overall in drafts come August?
They'll be close. Unless Jones gets hurt.
Around 7-8. Lay them straight.
I don't think he's going to be around 7-8 pick, Jordan Mason.
Dude, if it gets out that if what Jamie says becomes like big time mainstream news, he will absolutely be in that range, if not higher.
Go through this again. If what Jamie says that he could be the best running back, what specifically would have to happen?
They're going to lower the workload for Aaron Jones so that Jordan Mason can get his hands on the ball more. And by the way, they've got a pretty inexperienced quarterback now. So getting the run game going is going to be pretty important for Minnesota this year, I would think.
I will bet you $1 gazillion. And I have it, Dave. You can check. Gazillion. He will not be, Jordan Mason will not be picked in the first 7 rounds or 8. I don't see it.
Not if Aaron Jones is healthy. If he suffers an injury.
Yeah, I know. You're right. If Aaron Jones,
then I've got.
I would venture to guess that Aaron Jones may be around 7 pick.
I mean, looking at who went in round 8 in our draft yesterday, I guess I could see it, but this won't be reflective of ADP because there'll be more quarterbacks taken in ADP.
Where did Mason go yesterday?
Mason went in round 11. But other guys, but I was going to say, like, what's his best case scenario preseason that people look at him the way they look at Tyjae Spears, but Spears went in round 8.
How did he go after Elijah Mitchell and Braylon Allen and Jalen McMillan and Tank Bigsby? No, he's going to go ahead of all those guys. He's moving.
Probably.
He'll be moving on up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, those are a couple late round picks. We like my favorite late round pick right now, and this is definitely someone who will move up. But if you're drafting now, J.K. Dobbins, I took him in the 13th round yesterday. Woo. What a team! What a squad! Let's play it out. Crushed it. But J.K. Dobbins, 13th round. I also took him in the Eliminator League, that one of the Eliminator leagues that I'm doing. So super late. But all it's going to take is for him to sign with the Chicago Bears, and then J.K. Dobbins could be a top 8-round pick.
Sure. Like but what if he doesn't sign with anybody and he reverts back to the Chargers roster?
Yeah, then I'm going to drop my 13th round pick out of 14 rounds.
That's fine. Will it make you think any differently of Omarion Hampton or Najee Harris? Not that you think highly of Najee Harris.
Oh, if Dobbins is that I don't know. That's interesting. I would not love that. Yeah. What about you?
I think I'd have to be a little bit more concerned about Hampton. And I mean, I'm already kind of treating Najee like he's toxic. So
yeah,
it'll be double toxic if Dobbins is still there.
All right, folks. All right, we had an interesting question, Thomas. Oh, wait, do we have a screenshot or just want me to read the question? Sorry. So I'll just read the question.
Yeah, you can just read the question.
All right. Well, now I have to find the question. Okay, so we had a screenshot from a comment that Thomas sent to me via text. Comment from Brian from yesterday's show, and it says, "Hey, Thomas, when I have problems, I try to invert to eliminate things that I know will not work. So my problem is, how do I win my league? Could you do an inversion episode, like a surefire way to lose my league?" So Brian wants us to, it's almost like the Costanza thing. Just do the opposite of what he would normally do and things would work. But Dave, let's give him some terrible advice. How to guarantee to lose your fantasy league. You had some good ones. What'd you come up with?
All right, so here's the list that I have because I thought that this idea was fun. First and foremost, if you really want to lose your fantasy league, you can start out by taking a quarterback in round 1. And I mean, listen, you can still win your league if you actually do this, but why take great talent at a different position when you can take a quarterback in round 1 while the difference between that quarterback and the guys that'll go later on is negligible by comparison? And I've seen people take 2 quarterbacks with their first 4 picks. Now in a 2 QB league, it's a great move. In a 1 QB league, I still see it. I don't get it. That'll help you lose your league. As a player coming back from a torn ACL, reach for him. As a player holding out from training camp, reach for him too. Who cares if a guy is on a team that won't score a lot of touchdowns? Draft him anyway. And the last thing I wrote was targets don't matter. Overlook targets. Focus on touchdowns because that's certain to repeat year over year for everybody. Well, it kind of does for Mike Evans, but everybody else, I don't think so.
It is kind of an interesting exercise to just put out there into words bad ideas to make sure you don't do them. What did I say?
I said comments from people, by the way, who are like, I take a quarterback in round 1 every year and I win my league every year. You guys are jokers. So I'm open to arguments about some of this stuff.
Don't we usually have these conversations about like auction strategies?
Yeah,
sure.
I said you should drop rookie wide receivers after 2 bad weeks. That's a little throwback to Justin Jefferson for Peyton Barber. And Schaefer reminded me yesterday during the show privately that I also dropped Ladd McConkey last year. I think that was a little more reasonable, but that one did not work out for me. So I think, but
how about one more.
Mm-hmm.
Panic on a player after 1 week.
Yeah. Or spend big on Isaiah Likely on in Fab. That's actually a good one, right? Spend big on the, if it's like a backup running back that's replacing someone who just got hurt, then I get it. But people spent, man, I remember some crazy bids, 80% on Isaiah Likely, right? So
yep,
it's fun. It was a fun question, and actually, I think kind of can be helpful to just talk about the mistakes that people make so you can avoid doing them in the future. All right, news and notes. Start with a sad note here and our thoughts to the family and friends of Jim Irsay, Colts owner who passed away yesterday at the age of 65. Sad to see it. The NFL did not ban the tush push. Does this change anything for you guys? Were you ranking anyone as if tush push would be banned, or is this just full, status quo now?
Again, I'll go back to what I said. I don't think they were going to change their quarterback sneak philosophy if the tush push was banned. So no, did not change anything.
Liam Cohen was talking about Bashal Tutin fumbling, rookie running back for the Jaguars, 4th round pick. He fumbled in practice, and he kind of called that out. Also said some good things about Tutin, but this is a guy that I think Schneier was talking about it last week, had ball security issues, right, Jamie? Didn't Dan bring that up?
He said he had 9 fumbles in college.
Yeah.
9 times.
9 times. So, yeah, I was actually Bigsby yesterday went in round 11 in our draft. And in the consensus rankings that we were looking at for the purposes of this show, Tank Bigsby is 123rd overall. So that would, again, be round 11. Where did Tutin go in this draft? He went 2 picks later. So I don't know. Maybe Tutin is not going to have that big of a role this year, especially if he can't hold on to the football. We'll keep an eye on the development. Dave, what'd you make of the report from NFL Network's Cameron Wolf that the Dolphins, I don't know if it was running back coach or offensive coordinator, I'm sorry, saying that Devon Achane needs to get more work this year?
I like that, but I also read a story that said that Mike McDaniel talked about Achane and Jalen Wright working together a lot more often and getting Wright more involved in the offense. Achane's still going to be the main guy, but I think the same durability concerns that they had for Achane at this time last year still exist. And there's nothing wrong with them taking him off the field in low value situations, 2nd and 8 from midfield, something like that. I do wonder a little bit about why they signed Alexander Madison, why they drafted Ollie Gordon. Is it possible that one or both of those guys could end up taking short yardage work away from Achane or from Wright if Wright ends up playing a little bit more than he did last year? Still love Achane, still taking him with an early round pick. I hope that report, the one you're referencing, is what comes to fruition, that they put more on his plate, they're comfortable with it, and he ends up being, close to, 300, 310 touches, with the majority of them coming through the air.
13 carries, 5 touchdowns in his career from the 3-yard line or closer for Devon Achane. Maybe something to keep in mind. Probably not. I mean, small sample, but not great numbers from near the goal line. And Garrett Wilson was singing Kumbaya with the Jets, and there had been some talk about maybe he wants a trade, but he says he wants to be with the Jets for his career, wants the contract. And head coach Aaron Glenn said he wants to get Garrett Wilson the ball as much as possible. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will talk about our favorite late-round picks. We've already given you Tucker Kraft, J.K. Dobbins, and Jordan Mason. So we'll talk about more players that we like, including basically every quarterback. We'll be back after this on Fantasy Football Today.
I mean, can't you see it? The game is evolving. Records are breaking, and the stars are shining. Here on CBS Sports Network.
All right, so I want to start out with the quarterback discussion here. And basically, the premise of today's show is our favorite late-round picks. What we're using to define a late-round pick is the consensus PPR rankings that are on Fantasy Pros, and anyone picked one or ranked 100th or later. We do not have ADP, reliable ADP to use at the moment, but anyone ranked 100th or later. So in this case, picks or players 99 and 100 in the rankings are Brock Purdy and Caleb Williams. And then Jordan Love is 102nd. And then Dak Prescott is 107th. And then Justin Fields, 109, CJ Stroud, 110. So that is 6 quarterbacks in 12 picks, but that's when they're going to start flying off the board. My question for both of you, because Dave has Dak Prescott, J.J. McCarthy, and Jalen Milroe, which I'm assuming will be a super flex thing. Jamie has Justin Fields, Drake May, and Trevor Lawrence. I mean, if it were me, I would say Justin Fields, Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, Drake May. Who did I draft? Even Tua. I guess the question, like, who don't we like? Which late round quarterbacks don't we like? How do you even choose? I think Justin Herbert, Jordan Love. I don't even know what order it's going to be in, but I remember yesterday in the draft we did, going, all right, I'm going to take, Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson, another one I definitely want to take. It's like, all right, I'm going to take any one of these 7 guys. So I'm just going to keep waiting and waiting. So, Jamie, as you make that decision, are there guys that you zero in on? Are there guys that you just cross off the list? Because I know there are going to be a lot of late round quarterbacks that we like.
I think it comes down to, if you're taking one of these guys as your starter and the only quarterback you're drafting, or if you're planning to take them as your second quarterback with the hope that they hit it big and you can either pivot to that quarterback or you're trying to trade that quarterback. And so in the case of who's got the safer floor of some of the guys that you mentioned, obviously I think you look at Dak and what he's done. And I think it's 3 of the last 5 years, 4 of the last 5 years. When he's been healthy, he's been very good fantasy quarterback. And now we just got a new weapon. If you're talking about, shooting for the stars with, one of these guys that's going to use their legs, you mentioned Richardson, obviously Fields. I think Drake May deserves to be in that conversation based on what he showed last year. But there's a lot of questions, so those aren't exactly the ones I want to go into the season with as my only quarterback. But it, again, depends on what your league is and how you draft. So I did a draft. And I think, did I take Fields in the half PPR draft yesterday? I did 2 drafts back to back. So I'm a little.
You did.
I did a draft with the Fantasy Pros guys. I know in the Fantasy Pros draft, I drafted Caleb Williams. And it was interesting because using their mock draft product, and it was 4 of us drafting and then auto draft using their draft simulator. It's a pretty cool product. The idea was I took Caleb Williams, even though I have Dak Prescott ranked higher, it's 4 points for passing touchdowns in that mock draft. So I took Caleb Williams, and then all the safe guys like went. Dak went, Purdy went, forget who else. Herbert might have went also. Goff went, and then I just took Drake May, and so just went with 2 questionable guys. If you want to categorize them, but so much upside as we're expecting to see. With better receiving cores and better coaching, and all those things that go along with them. So I think it comes down to, again, what you're looking at, and I think there were three of the 4 of us took 2 quarterbacks in that draft. And I went back and looked at like the free agents. Like Tua was a free agent. There's somebody else that stood out to me that was maybe Jordan Love or CJ Stroud, one of those guys. If there's going to be those caliber of quarterbacks, Stafford was free agent. If there's going to be those caliber of quarterbacks on the waiver wire, like, you don't necessarily have to draft to, so you can still get a good number 2 option or a safer option if you're shooting for, one of these high upside type of guys. So know your league. If you want to go back to the drafting rules or whatever you framed it as, know your league, know the type of player or fantasy managers you're drafting with, and if everybody's going to take 2, it's in your best interest to probably pair up one of these risky quarterbacks with somebody that has a little bit safer floor. But if you draft a Burrow or a Hurts, I don't know if it's necessarily a priority to even try and waste a draft pick on another quarterback, where you can try and maybe get something that can be more of a home run at another position.
Yeah, I did draft Burrow, and then I drafted Trevor Lawrence, I believe, with my 14th, my last pick, and then Jamie took Drake May after. I just think that this is so. I mean, these quarterbacks are so good that even if I have Burrow, I don't necessarily feel like I have to take a backup, but I'm fine doing it if there's nobody on the board I really like. So, Dave, you had Dak Prescott and JJ McCarthy and Jalen Milroe on here, but that obviously needs some explaining here, because there's not telling people to take JJ McCarthy over Trevor Lawrence or anything like that.
Not yet, but we know the track record of Vikings quarterbacks with Kevin O'Connell. 51 games, 27 times a quarterback has had at least 22 fantasy points. That's in 6-point per passing leagues, at least 8 games per year. And if O'Connell can work magic with Kirk Cousins, turning him from a mid QB into a quality fantasy starter, did the exact same thing with Sam Darnold, then I think there's a chance that it could happen with JJ McCarthy, and you could get him after a lot of the names that we just reeled off for this big old group of quarterbacks that have high upside. Dak, to me, just makes a ton of sense as a great sleeper. We've seen it. Jamie mentioned it. It was 2021. He had 24 fantasy points per game, 23.9 in his final 9 games of the year after that. In 2023, 29 fantasy points per game in 11 games after the bye. That's when he was hyper targeting CeeDee Lamb. And then last year was really a bad year. He only had 20.7 in his first 5 games. All of Dak's games with at least 20 plus involved Ferguson having at least 11. Well, now he's got Pickens on top of Ferguson and in addition to CeeDee Lamb. And I've got questions about how good that Dallas defense is going to be. They've got a lot of injured players on that side of the ball. Could be a lot of high scoring games. It makes all the sense in the world to go after anybody with a late round pick at quarterback who's got huge upside. It helps when said quarterback has demonstrated the upside. And Dak Prescott's done that. And the worst case scenario is that Dak is over the hill and I cut him. And there's a quarterback, like Jamie mentioned, it could be Tua, it could be McCarthy, that's sitting on the waiver wire. After a couple of weeks of Dak, you say, I've had enough. I can't win with him. And you go and you make a change. And you hope that the guy that you make a change with catches on.
Here's where Dak Prescott has finished on a per-game basis in his last 6 seasons in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. Per game, Dak Prescott has been number 4, number 7, number 9, number 2, and number 21.
Right.
It's amazing and pretty similar in 4-point per passing touchdown leagues too. 2 concerns, I would say, for Dak. It's all kind of related. One would be, it's all the same. He's 32, or he will be in July.
Mm-hmm.
He barely ran last year. 1.6 rush attempts per game. And he took a lot of sacks last year. So I guess I just wonder if he's at the stage in the career where he's lost his mobility. But you figure you offset that by gaining George Pickens. So I have a follow-up question with Dak Prescott. If you drafted, let's say, Baker Mayfield, or someone that you feel good about, but maybe you still feel like I want to back up. You take Dak Prescott, or do you take Fields or Richardson, one of the guys who can run for a lot of yards, or Drake May?
Fields or Richardson. I mean, I think you're like Dak is the guy you want to pair with Fields or Richardson. You know, that's the type of player that you're looking at. You know, so
can I just illustrate that Dak Prescott has huge upside when I just read that he's been like a top 4 finisher per game in 3 of the last 6 seasons?
You did, but you also just mentioned the potential pitfalls of the most recent season that he's coming off of, when he missed half the season with a hamstring injury that I believe did require surgery, or
Yes,
was a pretty brutal one. So I like the upside of Dak. He's a top 10 quarterback for me. I said that when they made the Pickens deal. You know, I just thought that based, again, what his track record has been, and now he has, 2 pretty strong, pass catchers, 3 if you want to throw Ferguson in there. Dave mentioned the defense. The bigger concern for me is the run game and lack thereof. So,
I should have mentioned that.
I think the scenario for Dak Prescott is right in front of him to be in a lot of games where he has to throw the ball, and leaning on the strength of this offense, which is the receiving core at this point. So there's a lot to like about it. That being said, if I'm looking at, I drafted Baker Mayfield, I'm thinking of the quarterbacks I have ranked after Mahomes. So it's Baker, it's Bo Nix, it's Prescott, it's Caleb Williams. I'm looking at it specifically with Baker, Nix, and Dak. Like, I want to pair them with the more mobile quarterbacks that, if they hit, and we've talked about this with the what we hope could happen. I forget the name of the show. Heath had the category, Richardson and Fields. Again, I put May in that scenario also. Like, if these guys hit, because they'll be close to 700 plus rushing yards and hopefully over 4,000 passing yards, like, that's hard to find. And so Fields has done that, with his legs. Richardson has, shown us glimpses of doing that with his legs if he can, win the job. And even maybe Daniel Jones deserves that, because he did that with his legs that one season too, when he was 3,700. Obviously, May, was on pace to be the 3rd best rushing quarterback last year, had he played a full season. So there's a lot to like about what those guys can be. But if you're looking for the safe quarterback and another safe quarterback, I just don't think that's the right way to draft. As good as Dak can be with his upside, there's just not, I think, the same ceiling that those other guys can get to if they hit.
All right. So let's talk about running backs now. It's kind of a similar conversation with running backs in that there's a theme. The running backs that you've listed are, in a lot of cases, handcuffs. You're not finding starting running backs for the most part after pick 100. Maybe there are some guys that could take the job, but a lot of them really require an injury.
Well, can I ask one question? Because I know you said you had the rookies when you sent us your list, so I didn't list the rookies. I wasn't really looking for them. Where was Tracy in relation to Scadaboo? Because I know Dave put Scadaboo on the list.
Sure. So we're looking at Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. Tyrone Tracy is 86th.
Okay.
He is RB 28. Cam Scadaboo is 131st. He's RB 43.
Yeah, that's so much of a disparity that it's, I think, laughable right now.
You have to take Scadaboo there, you're saying.
Of course. Let somebody else take Tracy, and you just take the guy who might end up being the better of the two.
Yeah, right. I think, you look at like Jalen Wright is not going to just take the job from Devon Achane, right?
Mason's not going to, as much as I like him, he's not taking the job from Aaron Jones. It's going to be Aaron Jones probably getting hurt.
So Dave's got this list: Scadaboo, Garendo, Jalen Wright, Bashal Tutin, Jaden Blue for Dallas, Sean Tucker in Tampa Bay, Jarquez Hunter for the Rams, Phil Maffa in Dallas. Jamie has Zach Charbonnet for Seattle, Jordan Mason for Minnesota. He also has Isaac Garendo in San Francisco. That's one that we really like. And Ray Davis for Buffalo. So, I think for the most part, Dave, we're just talking handcuffs here, but what else are we looking for in late round running backs?
Obviously players that are going to play. And it's one thing to draft a handcuff. It's another thing to draft a handcuff that can still get 10 touches a game. And that's something that like Jordan Mason might do if Aaron Jones is fine. Okay. And what Jamie said doesn't happen. And Aaron Jones is still going to be in the role that he had last year. But Jordan Mason is not only going to be useful as a backup in fantasy, but if you're in a pinch, you need a flex, you could start him and you hope that he breaks a couple of long runs on the 10 touches per game that he would get. And I think that there's a handful, not that many, but a handful of running backs on both of our lists that qualify. I think Charbonnet is at the top of the list. I love that call because we've seen it. We've seen him work in tandem with Walker. And then we know that Walker isn't reliable to play 17 games. And when Charbonnet's gotten in there, he's been awesome for Seattle. And I might be able to make the argument that he's the more consistent option for what that offense is going to call for moving forward. So he's somebody that I love a lot. Mason's going to play, I think, around 10 touches per game. I think Scadaboo could end up starting the year playing around 10 touches per game, might have the short yardage role too, because he's such a bruiser. And then the second that Tyrone Tracy coughs up the football, Scadaboo could just take off. So I like him a lot as someone that could be a good late round steal at running back. But anything that a running back can do to not only be the guy behind the guy, but also play in tandem with the guy adds value for fantasy.
I agree, and that's why I like Tyjae Spears. But let me just play devil's advocate. Because Tyjae Spears really wasn't nearly as good as I wanted him to be last year. And if I look at, I was doing this math this morning, right? I looked at, there were 8 games that Spears played. He only played 12 games all year. One of them was without Tony Pollard. One of them, Tony Pollard left with an injury. And by the way, the one game without Tony Pollard was a great game for Tyjae Spears. He only scored 13.3 points, but he had 23 touches and over 100 total yards. Just didn't score a touchdown. But anyway, like there were 8 games that Tyjae Spears played with Pollard and with Spears not leaving with an injury. And in those games, he really wasn't very good. I mean, I don't have the fantasy points per game, but it was nothing to write home about. It was, a 51 catch pace. So a guy that you could maybe throw in there as a flex if you need it. But I guess my devil's advocate would be like, do I really care about a player who might score me 7-8 points in PPR if I need it in a pinch? Or should I just focus on a guy who has the most upside if the starter gets hurt? Maybe it's the same guy, right? Because you could definitely make that case for Spears. But
that's the point, to go after a running back that's the same guy.
Yeah, that would be great. But for example, Ray Davis might give me pretty much nothing on a weekly basis. But man, if James Cook gets hurt, Garendo. Yeah.
I think again, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but that's kind of the way like I rank these guys. Like, Jalen Warren's in a much better spot than Isaac Guerrero, for example, because Jalen Warren's going to play. Tyjae Spears is kind of similar to that. Like, if you're talking about just the handcuffs, like, you have to be patient with them. And these are going to be guys that, unfortunately, when it gets to injuries on your own roster or bye weeks, you have to make some tough calls on, do you give up on that player, knowing like, okay, Isaac Guerrero is the one player on my team that's not doing anything. But my gosh, if something happens to McCaffrey, he could be a top 20 running back, a top 15 running back, So there's lots of scenarios that you have to play out when you draft these kind of guys, Braylon Allen and Ray Davis and Jalen Wright and these kind of guys that aren't going to do very much, but unfortunately may have league winning upside. It's not best ball, it's redraft. And that's why you have to make some of these decisions when you have a 5-person bench and you suffer these injuries at wide receiver or quarterback, and you can't play these guys because they're not doing anything. So the 7 points, I think that was the number you gave for Tyjae Spears, PPR points, like you may need that.
I'm sorry, that wasn't anything. I don't know what he averaged.
I'm just saying,
throwing out a number,
the numbers you're attaching to those guys. If you're just looking at like, okay, I need a flex for this week because I don't want to cut these guys, then that's something just might have to do, as opposed to maybe dropping him for a Jack Besh who has a good matchup, for the Raiders and has gotten a couple targets recently, or Keon Coleman or something like that, So it's a matter of just, your roster construction. But I think, again, if you're playing this out from a draft perspective, you're drafting these guys with, okay, McCaffrey played 4 games last year. Isaac Guerrero is going to be somebody that I'm heavily invested in. Dave, mentioned Charbonnet, what he did last year when, or really his entire career when Walker's missed time. Like, you want to hold on to those type of guys. Same thing, I think, for Jordan Mason, again, looking at the situation, So
Sure.
It's a matter of, again, the sliding scale on your bench, the sliding scale of what those guys are doing in relation to the starter on their own NFL team, and just some of the decisions that you're going to have to make throughout the course of the fantasy season.
And you always might want to veer toward running backs on teams that are going to score a lot of points. Just one of those simple factors that just makes sense. Would you rather have Tyjae Spears on the Titans? It's a team that's not going to put up a lot of points. Or, Minnesota should put up some points. So Mason would be the comparison there.
I think
I'll give you again, it's just a strategy that I had with this Fantasy Pros draft. It was a 2 running back, 2 receiver league with 2 flexes, and it was half PPR. But I drafted 4 receivers with my first 7 picks, and the receivers were Puka, Terry McLaurin, Cortland Sutton, and Jerry Jeudy. So I planned to play those 4 guys. And my running backs were Christian McCaffrey and Joe Mixon. And then, so looking at the backfield, it was, okay, who can maybe step in if I need it? So my running backs on the bench right now are Jalen Warren, Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerrero, and I think I may have taken a flyer on somebody else. But you see the way that I built this team. It was, okay, 2 high-end starters with making sure that I handcuffed. And I said this when I drafted McCaffrey, Joe Pisapia, one of the guests we have on, he's the host of that show. And he said, how do you feel about McCaffrey? I said, I'm going to make it a point to reach for, quote unquote, Isaac Guerrero, which I did. It took him probably a round or 2 before I needed to, or would have gone otherwise, because I'm the McCaffrey manager. I want to lock out that backfield. You could say Jordan James may be the backup there. But again, the strategy was have the ability to use running backs as at flex,
Sure.
but more so don't need them. I don't need them if I don't have to play them, because that's the way I built that roster.
All right. So then within this discussion, who are some of the guys that you think could just become the starter for their team? I think Jaden Blue for Dallas is kind of, you think, Scadaboo? I
think he's got a shot.
I still think Tootin, despite the fumble and the situation there. I mean, you have a new regime coming in with 2 guys that, one in particular has struggled, or coming off season where he struggled in ETN. And I don't know if Bigsby's the type of running back that Liam Cohen's going to want to feature.
And maybe dark horse would be Charbonnet.
Yeah, it's a serious dark horse. I think the dark horse is Ray Davis if James Cook holds out.
Oh, yeah. Well, that could be. Okay. All right. Let's take a break, and we'll talk about wide receivers and tight ends going after pick 100. Got
to get your Knicks reaction too.
I don't really think we have to do that, to be quite honest with you. We will be right back on Fantasy Football Today.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal!
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
All right. So I thought, Dave, you had an interesting comment about.
No. Knicks. Let's go.
Dave, you had an interesting. I really don't want to do this. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. So anyway, let's go.
No, I need to know, I need to know the moments.
No, there were no moments. I was completely stoic, basically. So, Dave.
By now, it's been 25 years since they've done anything.
Yeah. The Pacers, I swear, man, made a deal with the devil. They've got to have, and I'm not joking when I say this, they've got to have 3 of the most improbable wins in NBA history.
Well, you saw the stat, right?
I didn't see the updated stat because I didn't want to read it, but I know the first 2 games in Cleveland, down by 7 or more with a minute left, they've won both games, and that's only happened 3 times in like 30 years or something like that.
Yes, they're 3 of the 4 with whatever the number is. And the other one I saw yesterday was since 1997, teams with whatever the lead was with 2.5 minutes left were 994-0.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's just unbelievable. Yeah, it's just pathetic. And I was reminded, though, by several people that the Reggie Miller series where he did the choke sign,
yeah,
the Knicks actually won that series. So,
Do you see there were Knicks fans chanting Knicks in 4 outside the game, outside the stadium?
the Knicks fans outside the stadium make me so embarrassed to be a Knicks fan. throwing garbage at people. This dude during the celebration last week or whenever they beat the Celtics threw like a metal pipe or something into a crowd. Just what? What's with? Why does everybody become such an idiot? You look at Philadelphia when they win the Super Bowl, they're tearing down posts and things. Like, what's wrong with people? Oh, man. All right, anyway, wide receivers. Dave, you had an interesting realization doing this exercise of looking for your favorite wide receivers after pick 100.
I struggled. I had a hard time coming up with names. It made me realize that I need to focus more on wide receivers with my first 8 or 9 picks because I don't know how many guys I'm really going to be into drafting at wide receiver from pick 100 on, especially compared to how I feel about the running backs, the quarterbacks, and the tight ends. We've literally talked about those 3 positions already. And I'm excited about a lot of those running backs. I've got a strategy for late round tight ends. Everybody has a strategy for late round quarterbacks, and it's deep this year. You can cherry pick those guys. Receiver, I just have a hard time seeing a name and going, yes, I love that guy. I want to have him on my team. But that being said, you can still make the case for a number of receivers after pick 100. It just happens to be on my list that the majority of them are either rookie or second-year wide receivers, all of whom I might pull an Azer and cut off my team after the first few weeks if they're doing nothing to start the year. And I don't want to pull an Azer. I want to have guys that I want to be patient with and carry on my bench all year as long as I can until injuries rack up and then I got to remove them. But, it just made me want to focus a lot more on wide receivers earlier in drafts.
All right. So I am just looking at ADP last year. And let me just read you some of the names from Fantasy Pros PPR ADP. Some of the names of wide receivers who were drafted after pick 100. This was drafted. This was ADP. Ladd McConkey, Jordan Addison, Cortland Sutton, Brian Thomas Jr., Jamison Williams, Khalil Shakir, Jerry Jeudy, I believe, is on this. Yep, Jerry Jeudy, Jacoby Myers.
Wow.
Right? Isn't that crazy? Amazing. All right, Jamie. All right, let's get some names. So Dave has Matthew Golden. A lot of rookies. Matthew Golden, Emeka Ibuka, Kyle Williams. Matthew Golden currently 141st in the rankings.
Yeah, I like that value for a first-round receiver.
You have some really deep picks, too, that we'll talk about. Jamie has Ricky Pearsall, who's pretty close to 100th, but he meets the criteria. Darnell Mooney. You put Coleman when you wrote the email. I put Tevin Coleman in my notes, but that is Keon Coleman.
How to lose your league.
And Cedric Tillman. So Coleman and Tillman. Let's talk about Jamie.
And there's a lot of rookies that I like in this range. Again, I saw what you said, so I didn't want to list them.
The rookie value is just if there's a rookie wide receiver that you like that's not Travis Hunter, Teteroa McMillan, I'm pretty sure they're all going after pick 100, right?
Yeah, I mean, you made the case for Harris. Dave mentioned Ibuka probably needs an injury, but certainly worth, drafting and seeing what happens the first couple weeks of the season. Luther Burden, Jack Besh. For me, I draft him a lot. I think, Jaden Higgins, we were fighting to see who's going to be the best Texans receiver last year. Remember when they had Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell
Yep.
coming up the season? I think we all settled on Nico being that guy, but there was a lot of debate. And now they have, Christian Kirk and two young guys. And I think Higgins is certainly in this range worth taking a flyer on. Even Christian Kirk, same thing. So
I had him I had Kirk on my list. Yeah.
there's a lot of guys, I think Dave's point is valid, especially as we've seen these drafts unfold. Like taking receivers early is a good strategy because of where these running backs are ending up. But you should still have the intent of one or two receivers in this range to be targets and seeing how they're going to, sort of play out throughout the early part of the season before you make a decision on cutting them. So again, I'll reference that same draft I did. I drafted those four receivers early. I only drafted a fifth one, which was Besh. And it was, one of my last picks, if not my last one, because I think there is a path to targets for him, not necessarily first or second on the team, but can be the second wide receiver on his roster. So Harris is a guy I know you like. Again, Higgins is another one that has a chance. Burden's going to be fun. Ibuka might be fun. There's just a lot of these guys. Obviously, Matthew Golden, going in this range is an easy one. So there are a lot of these rookie wide receivers, like you just, listed McConkey and Brian Thomas in this range. Like, I don't think they're going to be that good clearly, but
yeah,
there's opportunities for some of these rookies to be prominent on their rosters.
Well, let's focus on the four guys that you provided: Ricky Pearsall, Darnell Mooney, Keon Coleman, Cedric Tillman. And let's go one by one and tell me what you think the best case scenario is. It's a tough exercise. I hate to put you, it's so hard to predict that, but what do you think the best case scenario is for Ricky Pearsall?
I mean, you saw the last two games that, finally comfortable, I'm assuming with his health, having to fight through what happened in the beginning part of the season after getting shot and, being out the beginning part of the year. What he did was not with Brock Purdy entirely, so keep that in mind. But look, this is a receiving core that we've been talking about. Juwan Jennings could be the best guy there. Well, what if it's Ricky Pearsall, who's a first-round draft pick, and, Brandon Ayuk is not there? There's just so much to love about the scenario here of what he could be for Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy, and you're getting him not right now at a big discount compared to Jennings. I think you will get him at a discount compared to Jennings, and it's just an easy draft pick to easy player to target based on his draft value.
Darnell Mooney, what's the best case scenario for him?
So he played really 1.5 games with Michael Penix, and the first one he had a 13-point PPR game. I don't know if he's going to be as consistent as he was with Kirk Cousins. But you look at this team. So we're doing our outlooks right now. So if you're looking at the player pages on our site, we used to do these for our magazine. We're not doing our magazine anymore. That I got the AFC South and the NFC South. Dave, how many years have we been doing outlooks?
Oh gosh, since we started.
15 plus seasons. I've never done a team as easy as the 2025 Atlanta Falcons. There is zero depth to this team.
Right.
And it's bleeping fantastic. A, to do the outlooks, player outlooks for them. And B, they're going to get so many opportunities. Drake London and Darnell Mooney. Look, Ray McLeod is a good player, but he's not a featured guy for this offense. Kyle Pitts has an opportunity here, but you look at the two receivers. I mean, Drake London should easily be north of 150 targets. And Darnell Mooney had, 106 last year, if I'm not mistaken? It should be 120 plus. And so for a number two receiver that you're getting this late, it's just such an easy player to click on. So the draft that we did on our site, I drafted Drake London, and I really was struggling with, do I want to take Darnell Mooney as well? And I should have. He went, I think, around later, Thomas, if I'm not mistaken. They're just going to get so many chances. And if Penix is anywhere close to being as good as he was in college and in what he showed in week 18, like, they're going to have monster seasons.
Well, see, that's the thing. Because originally I had Darnell Mooney as a guy that, and I do think, where's he coming in on this consensus rankings? Darnell Mooney's pretty low.
He's free.
He is. Yeah, that's the thing. Well, it's 118th. So that's round 10. He's not exactly free. Free. Christian Kirk goes right after him, and I would take Kirk ahead of him.
Not me.
I think I got a little bit cold on Mooney doing some research because, you mentioned the 120 targets. It's very possible that they are more pass heavy, but I would point out that, remember, Bijan got off to kind of a slow start. Then they became one of the most run heavy teams in football. I think they had the third lowest pass rate from week 7 on. And just for the season, they were 24th in pass rate. So they were a run heavy team last year. Bijan is the engine for them. Mooney, like I said, 1 end zone target, 2 green zone, 6 red zone. So it'll be a little bit more balanced, but Drake London is the guy in that area. And I think it's just this simple fact. Darnell Mooney's been in the league for 5 years. He's never finished in the top 30 per game. So I just don't see him having like a huge upside season. I think the best case scenario would be like wide receiver 24 per game, which would be great if you're getting him in the 10th round. But I don't see league winner potential here.
Do you see that with Kirk?
No, I don't see that with Kirk. I see a better path to wide receiver 24 for Kirk than I do for Mooney. Do I see it with anyone? I guess I could see it with Golden, like league winning potential. I could see it with a guy like Golden.
You see it with Pearsall for sure.
I could see it with Pearsall, yeah. I guess I could see it with Keon Coleman, but I could also see him being dropped in 3 weeks.
So Coleman is an interesting one for me because they didn't do very much to, I think, overhaul the receiving core. They did some tweaks. You lose Cooper, you lose Mac Hollins, and I think it's really funny to see how much of an impact Mac Hollins made at the end of the season for Josh Allen and the Bills. But they did really nothing of huge significance. I mean, Josh Palmer and Elijah Moore could be nice players for them and can easily outproduce Keon Coleman based on what we saw. But I really want to see what Coleman can become. And you look at the 2 games before he suffered the wrist injury against Miami. I believe that was week 9. He was really starting to get going. That's right when they traded for Amari Cooper. He had 2 very solid games. And you say this all the time. It's 100% accurate. Second half of the season for rookie wide receivers is when they start to show, I think, what they're really made of, because they're finally comfortable and they're starting to understand, I think, the game, the speed of the game, what their quarterbacks want to do, game plans, etc. And then he suffers that wrist injury, and he was never the same guy. Playing time wasn't the same, everything. And it wasn't like there were guys that were just, dominating. Khalil Shakir was solid. Mac Hollins was making plays. It wasn't anybody else, really. So I think there's a huge opportunity here for a guy who's got immense draft capital, big play potential, great quarterback, great system. Like, he's somebody that again, we talk about drafting receivers early. This is a guy that I circle all the time. I want to draft Keon Coleman as much as I can. If he stinks, oh well.
Right.
I'll cut him. But if he's what he could be in a loaded receiver class from a year ago when he was drafted ahead of a lot of these guys, like, there's still a lot to love about what Keon Coleman can become.
Okay. Yeah. 15-yard ADOT. I'd like to see that go down. That's always a number I look at, 15 specifically. You just do not find consistent wide receivers with a 15-yard ADOT or higher, with very few exceptions. A guy like Mike Evans has had a couple of seasons where he's had that kind of ADOT and been very good. I think Tyreek Hill had one, but you've got to be a special player because it's just tough to catch. He had a 50% catch rate last year, 87th out of 89 wide receivers with 50 or more targets. So I think if Keon Coleman's going to take the next step, he's going to have to lower that ADOT. And we see that a lot year 2. It could be a lot lower. It could be a lot higher. Wide receivers really develop more of a game. So
I could see like a poor man's Jameson Williams. Clearly not as explosive, but
you know what? I went back and I watched some tape today, and I think they used him in those 2 games. I watched every route he ran in those 2 games you mentioned before the wrist injury. He had 7 targets in both games. He was very good in both games, and he had a touchdown overturned. And they gave him 3 targets that were sort of back shoulder throws or jump balls, either in the end zone or at the 1 or 2 yard line. And he caught one of them. He had one overturned, and it was incomplete on one. I think that's where they're going to go to Keon Coleman. I think he's going to be their back shoulder, their jump ball, their contested catch guy in the end zone. And I think he's their best bet for end zone targets. So that and that was kind of, like, he had a lot of contested catches in college, but he also, I think, was pretty bad on contested catches, just that it doesn't separate. So they're all contested. But I do think you're going to see that from Coleman. You're going to see a lot of touchdown opportunities. He's a big body guy, and it makes sense to use him in the end zone. And guys, I'm very sorry that I've been talking too much. I have to leave, unfortunately, for an appointment. Cedric Tillman's also on the list. Dave, why don't you finish with your wide receivers, which were Golden, Ibuka, and Kyle Williams as rookies. And Kyle Williams going 183rd. And then Deontay Johnson, Roman Wilson, and then just Pat Bryant, who's just it's kind of like a random name right now.
All those guys are like 250th and later. This is
The
for
last
like the
two.
deepest of leagues.
That would be
they-
Deontay Johnson, Roman Wilson, and Pat Bryant.
Pat
Yeah.
Bryant. Yeah, and Bryant might end up going ahead. I don't know if Deontay or Roman are going to even get drafted in many leagues, but Pat Bryant is someone that could have a good opportunity in Denver to play right away. I'm not sure how much they love their receivers other than Cortland Sutton. Marvin Mims obviously is somebody that could play half the snaps like he did last year and have some huge boom weeks, but a lot of bust weeks. I wonder if they view him like Marcus Colston, just kind of like a tall, cool character who just does a lot of things solidly. Kyle Williams in New England could be their number one target getter this year. We don't know how healthy Stephon Diggs is going to be, when he'll be himself, if he'll be himself. And early returns on Kyle Williams have been good. And we always, there's a player every year that gets drafted and we go, well, why did they take this guy? And that's Emeka Egbuka is that guy this year. And those players always find a way to end up mattering, either because of an injury or something else. And I just wonder if Egbuka is going to end up being a factor a hell of a lot sooner than we expect, for reasons that I can't justify, mainly because I don't want to justify them. I want Evans and Godwin to be themselves and to play 17 games, but we know they're older. We know Godwin is coming back from a big injury. Egbuka can end up mattering and being a reliable number 3 receiver in PPR. And where are we getting him? 152nd? It's around 13, man. That's pretty good.
All right. Again, I apologize for cutting the show a little bit short today. The tight ends that Dave and Jamie were looking at after pick 100, both of them had Tucker Kraft on their list. Dave had Tyler Warren and Jamie had Dalton Kincaid. And another guy, as I was watching the Keon Coleman tape this morning, when Kincaid gets targets, he pops. He's still a pretty talented player, you know. I hope he can get targeted. And Jamie, of course, you always bring up that he was playing quite injured last year. So anyway, thanks, guys. And we will talk to you all on Tuesday, actually. We don't have a show on Monday. It is Memorial Day. I hope everybody has a wonderful 3-day weekend. And we will talk to you on Tuesday with a new edition of Fantasy Football Today. See ya.